Hi, we're Jake and Dodie Glover, and we are some of your IMB missionaries serving in southern Mexico. We want to share with you today about our calling into missions.
I grew up in a Christian family. My dad was actually a Southern Baptist pastor, and so I became a Christian at an early age. And I attended GAs as a little girl, and that is the program in the church that taught specifically girls about missions, missionaries. And so I can remember hearing all of the stories and just always being intrigued by other cultures, other places, missions, and missionaries.
I too attended a Southern Baptist church. My parents were very faithful in taking me and my sisters to church every time the doors were open. And our church had an RA program, and in that RA program I learned a lot about missions as well. Never really thought that missions was in my future, but God has a way of surprising us.
And so as a teenager, I felt a call into ministry, but I didn't really know what it was going to look like, what it was supposed to look like. But I felt like the Lord was calling me into something, possibly vocational ministry. And so I went to college and I got a teaching degree and I started teaching in the public schools. Actually, before that, I had never really been on an international mission trip. And I really had the desire to do that. And so I graduated in December, and I had this semester where I didn't want to enter into a teaching job in the middle of the year. And so I decided to go on a short-term, about 3-month trip to Venezuela to teach English in a school, but it was through a missions organization. And that was my first exposure to international missions and even flying. And so it was a pretty big step. And it was a challenging trip in many ways, but it was also a time in my life where God was just growing me so much and showing me so much of what He could do through me. And so I kind of got a taste of it for the first time at that age and just decided, I could see myself doing this for the rest of my life, like doing missions in some form. And I went ahead and became a teacher, started teaching for a couple of years, but was attending a church where a lot of my friends were going to seminary. And so I thought, I really have always had this desire to learn more about theology and missiology and maybe explore, what does God really want me to do if He wants me to pursue this vocational ministry or missions. And so I decided just to take the next step. God doesn't always just reveal the plan for the rest of our lives. In fact, very rarely does He ever do that. And so I just decided, okay, Lord, I'm going to obey You, and I'm going to start taking seminary classes, and eventually just quit teaching and went to seminary full time. And that was just the only step I knew to take at that time. And then eventually He began to show me what was next.
I, at 14 years old, was at a summer camp when I felt the Lord calling me into ministry. And it was quite a surprise because neither of my parents, although they are faithful Christians, were not in vocational ministry. And so it was quite a surprise for them when I told them that I felt called to be a preacher. But they're very supportive of it. They wanted me to follow God's will for my life and encouraged me in that direction. When I graduated from high school, I went on my first mission trip. Our home church at that time had a relationship with some IMB missionaries in Central America. And so they invited me down for a few weeks in the summer. And so I got to travel around with them all through the mountains and preach and live life with the people and just really see what the missionary life was all about. But that didn't really change my what I felt was my calling. And so I came back home and started school, started college, and got involved in the preaching ministry at our college, and began to preach every Sunday and get involved in lots of different things going on in local churches, preparing to become a pastor. And during my time in college, I also got real involved with the international mission at our university and really just got exposed to people from different cultures. And although I never felt called to become a missionary, I felt called to take the gospel to different cultures. And so I really thought at that time that I was going to be pastoring a church that was very involved in international missions. And so when I graduated from college, I went with the IMB as a summer missionary to Western Europe and got to work in refugee camps in Western Europe. And during that season, I was exposed to people from over 70 different cultures, which was quite life-changing for anybody to meet people from so many different places. I came back home from that, started seminary, and got very involved in the church that I met my wife in. And during that time, I was going to school, preparing to be a pastor, not knowing that God was preparing to change my course.
And I had started going to this church, I guess, a semester at least, maybe a year before Jake showed up there. And I had met a man who had gone on a mission trip, and the church had adopted a people group in the Amazon jungle, and they were committing as a church to send regular teams to the Amazon. And it just so intrigued me because I had just come back from Venezuela. I still had a heart for specifically Latin America and Spanish-speaking peoples, but really anywhere in regards to missions. And so they said, yes, we would love to have you come at some point. And so I got one of their cards, their prayer cards, from the people group prayer card, and started praying for the people group and just waiting to see, what the Lord would do, if he would lead me into that or not. And I also had met Jake, and we were dating at that time. And so
yeah, we were very involved in our local church, attending seminary. I was preparing to be a pastor. She was still figuring out what that would look for her. In fact, she and I had talked about marriage, and this particular Sunday night, when the church was presented with this opportunity to be involved in the Amazon, I just really, and as they were presenting it, there was just like one of those times when the Holy Spirit just comes upon you, and you're just like, yes, this is what I'm supposed to do. And so as soon as they gave the invitation, we're concluding the service, there was an announcement made that after the service, these men would be in the foyer to meet with people who had questions. So as soon as they said that, man, I didn't even say anything to Dodie. I just ran out and was out there talking to them for about 30 minutes. I came back into the sanctuary, and she goes, "Where did you go?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to Peru." And she goes, "Well, if you would have just waited for me, I would have gone and introduced you. I'm already going to Peru too." And so she and I got very involved in our church's Peru ministry, where we were going several times to the Amazon jungle. And it was on one of those trips where we just felt like, you know what, this may be more than just us pastoring a church that sends missionaries. Maybe we're the ones that need to be sent. And so on one of those particular trips, after Dodie and I had been dating for a long time, after we had discussed the possibility of getting married and a life and ministry together, on the Amazon River, on her birthday, I pulled her aside and said, "This is the life that I want, and I want it with you." And so I asked her to marry me. And that just started a life on a venture together. And so after that, we came home, and we had already talked with the IMB about transitioning and after seminary. And so when I graduated, they created a job in the Amazon for us. And so we went. And we went with our 1-year-old little girl. And now here we are, several years later, with 4 kids and still doing this. And so I guess for me, the thought is, be willing to go wherever God is opening up doors for you. Like we had a vision of what ministry would look like. But what God did for us was he just began through over the years, me in Guatemala, Dodie in Venezuela, then again me in Europe, and then throughout college, as we both got very involved in the international mission ministries at our schools, and just being open to what God was doing through our local church. We just felt like God just used all of that to redirect us to here we are now.
And so don't be surprised if you go on a mission trip when you feel that tug and God's saying, maybe you could do this long term. And so that's how it happened with us. That's how it happens with a lot of people. And so, you know, you may not know what it's supposed to look like or what it's going to look like, but you can just take that next step of obedience and be available.